The government urges people not to panic buy fuel after some petrol stations had to close because there aren't enough tanker delivery drivers. But this afternoon there are long queues of motorists in some parts of the country trying to fill up. Petrol station owners insist there is no need to panic.
If you don't need to fill up, don't fill up. There's no shortage. If you're unlucky enough when you do need to fuel that a site is out, chances are the next one nearest won't be.
Well, ministers say they are moving heaven and earth to resolve the shortage of delivery drivers. We'll be examining the options. Also this lunchtime. A vigil tonight for London schoolteacher Sabrina Nessa as police continue to question a man suspected of her murder. It could take a decade to clear the backlog in cancer treatment in England, according to a new report. The ordeal of migrants shivering in the forest. They say they've been illegally pushed out of the European Union by Polish border troops. Anyone for doubles? The Duchess of Cambridge congratulates Emma Raducanu on winning the US Open. And meet the man who spent years collecting old postcards and who's now tracing the people they were sent to.
Coming up in sport on the BBC News channel, the wait is over. The 43rd edition of the Ryder Cup begins shortly, with Europe looking to retain their title in Wisconsin.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. Senior government ministers are meeting this afternoon to discuss the closure of some petrol stations because of a shortage of delivery drivers. Queues are forming this lunchtime at several petrol stations, despite government pleas for people not to panic buy fuel. Both BP and Esso have closed some forecourts because of supply problems. Ministers are not ruling out the idea of changing visa rules to bring in foreign lorry drivers, or using soldiers to drive fuel tankers. Here's our business correspondent Thea Leggett.
Queues outside petrol stations. They've been appearing up and down the country as motorists worry they might not be able to fill up. The fuel giant BP's admitted that some of its outlets have been running dry and a small number have had to close. Other retailers have also been affected. But operators say panic buying will only make matters worse.
If you don't need to fill up, don't fill up. There's no shortage. If you're unlucky enough when you do need to fuel that a site is out, chances are the next one nearest won't be. And let's be honest, there's plenty of petrol stations for a vast majority of the population. It's not as if you have to drive half an hour to find one. There's plenty about. Yeah. So don't panic buy.
And it's because the company can't get hold of enough tanker drivers. But that's merely a symptom of a much wider problem, a national shortage of heavy goods vehicle drivers that's affecting the entire economy.
At the moment, experts say the country needs an extra 90 to 100,000 drivers. But recruiting and training them takes time.
It isn't just as simple as, yes, you've passed your test today, brilliant, we're going to send you to Scotland or Cornwall tomorrow, because there's lots of other things and other safety related things that have to be done, making sure they know how to load it, how to secure loads and things like that, their driver's hours, making sure they know what's done. It's not just a case of a steering wheel attendant anymore. There's a lot more pressure behind a driver to make sure that all the boxes are ticked.
This instructor says there's plenty of demand from would-be drivers.
The only problem we have at the moment is test dates. It's getting enough tests for the candidates because we've got such a backlog, and I'm sure we're not the only company that's in that position.
People within the industry say more immediate measures are needed while new drivers are trained up. They want foreign hauliers to be given short-term visas to help fill the gap.
Remember that left mirror again?
The government's been reluctant to do this, but today the Transport Secretary said all options were open.
I would do whatever is required if that would help. What I don't want to do, and I've been hinting at this, is undercut with, as has happened before, cheaper European drivers, and then find that our drivers drop out because they're being undercut. That doesn't solve the problem, it just creates a new problem.
The shortage of lorry drivers is so serious that it's unlikely any single step will solve it in the short term. But ministers are acutely aware that further disruptions to the supply chain could mean even more empty shelves in the run-up to Christmas. Thea Leggett, BBC News.
Now let's go to Westminster and talk to our political correspondent Nick Eardley. Nick, Ministers saying they'll move heaven and earth to sort this out, but what are they going to do?
It's a very good question, Ben, because not much is being ruled out, but not much is being ruled explicitly in either. I mean, the main message coming from the government this morning is don't panic. There's plenty of petrol to go around, but there is a problem getting it from refineries into forecourts and into our cars. There will be a meeting of ministers to discuss what they do next this afternoon. It will feature some of the senior ministers who are right at the heart of these discussions. But it also doesn't feel like we're on the brink of some big announcement that would decide how the government is going to deal with this. There are a couple of things in particular that are being considered. One is the idea of the army being brought in to help get petrol around the country. That would be relying on no-deal Brexit planning. But again, that's not something that appears to be imminent. There's also the prospect being discussed, as you heard in Theo's piece there, about potentially in the short term loosening some of the visa rules to allow more HGV drivers, perhaps from the continent, to come into the country. I don't think the government completely agrees on that. There are some ministers who think that that could be a good idea to ending the immediate problem. There are some, particularly the Home Office, who aren't convinced. So there are some big questions for the government to consider. And if we see more images of people queuing up outside petrol stations, I suspect those questions will only get louder.
All right, Nick, thank you very much. Nick Eardley there, our political correspondent. A vigil will be held tonight in South East London to remember Sabrina Nessa, the primary school teacher murdered last weekend. Detectives are still questioning a man on suspicion of killing her, and they've also issued CCTV footage of another man they want to talk to. Sabrina, who was 28, is thought to have been attacked as she walked to a pub near her home in Kidbrooke last Friday. June Kelly has this report.
Last Friday, Sabrina Nessa was finishing her working week as a primary school teacher and looking forward to the weekend. 7 days on, she's in the thoughts of so many who never knew her, but are horrified and angry at the way her young life was taken. Sabina, who was 28, was on her way to a pub in Kidbrooke Village in South East London to meet a friend. She never arrived. A 38-year-old man is now in custody on suspicion of murder. Detectives are also looking for this man and have issued these images. He was caught on CCTV walking in Pegler Square, which is where Sabina was heading. Police are appealing for anyone who recognises this man to contact them immediately. He's believed to have access to this silver car. At the school where Sabina taught, parents and their children are mourning a much-loved teacher.
Very sad news, very, very sad. We not expect. Yes, she's a kind person and lovely person, and we are missing her.
She's very helpful and she helped us do our spellings.
Andrea, did you know her?
Yes.
What do you remember of her?
She helped me when I was lost, and when I was with my teacher, she helped me get back to my mum.
Sabrina Nessa's killing has once again brought into sharp focus the issues of violence against women, their safety on the streets and male attitudes. In this community now, the council is issuing hundreds of personal alarms to females. This evening in Kidbrooke, local people will hold a vigil in memory of Sabina.
It's a chance for the community to come together, collective grief, a show of solidarity, and also, a chance to sort of demand justice for Sabina. It's going to be just a time for some sort of like gentle reflection. There'll be a few people speaking, and we'll have candles there.
And they're asking people who can't be there to also light a candle for Sabina. June Kelly, BBC News.
A new report suggests it could take more than a decade to clear the backlog in cancer treatment in England. The study by the Institute for Public Policy Research says almost 20,000 people have not been diagnosed because of missed referrals during the pandemic. And it says that even with a 5% increase in treatments, hospitals may not clear cancer waiting lists until 2033. Here's our health correspondent Dominic Hughes.
The pandemic has affected all parts of the NHS, with cancer services no exception. One worry is the number of people who fail to get a diagnosis of cancer because they've not yet been referred for specialist tests. Now, a report from the IPPR suggests that could mean a huge backlog of cases we don't yet know about.
There is a major backlog in cancer referrals and then in treatment. And the problem is we haven't really got the capacity or workforce to be able to catch up with this. And as this study shows from a very reputable group, that if we don't do something about it, we'll have this problem for a decade. So we need to do something about it, and it's not OK.
The report estimates around 19,500 people have not yet been diagnosed with cancer because of missed referrals. Diagnostics is a big issue, with the pandemic leading to a 37% drop in endoscopies, a 25% drop in MRI scans, and 10% fewer CT scans than expected. NHS England says cancer services have now returned to pre-pandemic levels, but the report says if the health service was able to improve that performance by 5%, the backlog would still not be cleared until 2033. And the authors warn that without a big investment in equipment and staff, thousands of people will be left waiting for a diagnosis and treatment. Dominic Hughes, BBC News.
Just over 800,000 people, or 1 in 80, are estimated to have had COVID in the UK last week. That's slightly down on the previous week, according to figures released today by the Office for National Statistics. Infection rates are falling in England for the first time in several weeks, but the ONS say that rates remain high across the UK. They report there are encouraging signs that infection rates have continued to decrease amongst young adults, possibly reflecting the impact of the vaccination rollout. A 31-year-old man accused of murdering 3 children and a woman in Derbyshire last weekend has appeared today before Derby Crown Court. Damien Bendel spoke only to confirm his name via a video link from custody. The bodies of 35-year-old Terry Harris, her 13-year-old son John, 11-year-old daughter Lacey and Lacey's friend, 11-year-old Connie Gent, were all found last Sunday morning at a house in Killamarsh. Damien Bendel was remanded in custody. The BBC has obtained first-hand accounts from migrants who claim they have been illegally deported from the European Union by Polish border troops. 5 migrants attempting to cross into Poland have died from suspected hypothermia and exhaustion in the last week. Well, this morning, the European Commission has called the situation concerning and has urged the Polish authorities to give care and assistance to those on the border. Our Europe correspondent Nick Beak sent us this report.
They thought they were going to die, stranded in the freezing forest, far from home. We found Kelly and Owen, brothers from Nigeria. They claim they've been pushed back and forth by both Belarusian and Polish border guards for the past 3 weeks.
We are playing us like a football. The Belarus will beat us, push us to Poland. The Poland will catch us, beat us, push us back to Belarus.
The men had flown to Belarus from various countries, all with the promise they'd be able to travel onto a neighbouring country in the EU. But 21-year-old Magellan from Cameroon explained what Belarusian troops actually did.
They monitor the Polish police across the border. They tell us this way there's no Polish police. So they will tell us we must cross those wires. So we creep, we crawl under.
We can see a lot of people here are not in a good state. Apparently a doctor's on the way, but also the border force are on the way, so it's not clear what's going to happen to these men.
Belarus is often called Europe's last dictatorship, but Poland, an EU country, has declared that migrants can be pushed back over its border, a policy that's illegal under international law.
And so have your border force been pushing migrants back into Belarus?
Talk to our press office, he tells us. Human rights activists have been trying to find those stranded on the border.
We don't know how many other deaths, are there in the forest.
Lawyer Marta Gorczynska has been working here for a month.
Politicians are talking about politics, but what we can see is just people. It's not politics at all. It's just people that need assistance, people that need medical assistance, people that need international protection to not be returned to the country where they face danger. So here on the ground, it's absolutely not politics. It's just humanitarian crisis that we are dealing with right now.
The fear among charities, human rights groups, is that we're going to be seeing more of this because more people are coming to Belarus. More people are trying to get across the border into Poland, into the European Union.
There is an organised assault on the Polish border, and we will certainly not budge. We cannot be subject to blackmail.
Back in the forest, another young man emerges from the woodland. Jafar is a 20-year-old from Iraq. He's got hypothermia. He and 2 others are taken to hospital. The rest driven to a quarantine centre. But all fear they will soon be sent back to the freezing forest once again. Nick Beak, BBC News, on the Poland-Belarus border.
More than 400 climate strikes are being held across Germany, with the Swedish activist Greta Thunberg due to speak outside the Parliament building today. Organisers say the protests are part of a global climate strike in more than 1,000 communities around the world. Well, it comes ahead of the German elections this weekend, where climate issues are playing a major role. Our correspondent Jenny Hill is in Berlin for us right now. Jenny, what's the latest?
Well, there must be probably tens of thousands of people taking to the streets here in Berlin today. You know, Germany's got used to big mass protests like this in recent years, but the timing, as you say, of this one is particularly important, just 2 days before this country goes to the polls to elect a new government and a new German chancellor. Germany is really looking at climate change as a huge problem, and it's certainly been one of the major election issues, and that's because Germans are finding it harder and harder to ignore the damage done. If you wander into the German forest at the moment, you'll see that acres and acres of trees are dying or have had to be cut down amid warmer, drier conditions. Those terrible floods that people experienced here in the west of the country earlier this summer, which killed so many people, have also heightened the public sense of crisis. And of course, you've got marches like this. These young people have been coming onto the streets trying to raise awareness, and they are having an influence. Politicians are aware they can't ignore this issue, and if you look at the party manifestos ahead of this election, you'll see that all of the major political parties here are proposing action to one degree or another. You'd think perhaps the Green Party, who propose the most stringent measures, might be the beneficiaries of this kind of public passion. Actually, they're not doing as well as they'd hoped. They're looking to end up in third place, although they've got a good chance of being in some kind of coalition government. Whatever happens at this weekend's general election, though, Germany's next government, Germany's next chancellor, will not be able to ignore this kind of public pressure.
All right, Jenny, thank you very much. Jenny Hill. And the time is 18 minutes past 1. Our top story this lunchtime. The government urges people not to panic buy fuel after some petrol stations had to close because there are not enough tanker delivery drivers. And coming up, one of sport's oldest and greatest rivalries, the Ryder Cup, gets underway in the United States.
Coming up in sport on the BBC News channel, a thrilling comeback in Christchurch for England's netballers as they beat New Zealand in their first series win against the world champions.
Islamist militants from Al-Shabaab have brought terror to Mozambique for more than 4 years. The group, which has links to Islamic State, operates in the north of the country. Violence there has left more than 2,500 people dead and 700,000 people displaced. Well, Rwanda has sent troops to help, and our Deputy Africa editor Anne Soy has travelled with them.
Making the best of what's available. But what should be a normal activity has to happen under watchful eyes here in northern Mozambique. For months, residents have been terrorized by militants affiliated to the Islamic State.
Every time we ran, they pursued us. Then they beat us. They beat us so badly. They slaughtered people, so we kept running. Our mosques have been destroyed. The churches have also been destroyed. We still don't understand what they want.
They have only recently resettled here after the area was made safe by Rwandan soldiers.
This has been the scene of attacks from militants since 2017, which intensified last year, displacing tens of thousands of people. And the Rwandan forces say they have now liberated 90% of the province, which is what they have come to show us.
The motivation is actually driven by our history. We have experienced this before, and we feel that we should partake in any activity or any initiative that would lead to the security of people wherever we are called upon.
They launched the offensive here in July after being invited by the Mozambican government. It followed a global outrage after an attack at this hotel in Palma. It was popular with experts. Hundreds were hiding here when the militants struck.
On the
10th day we came here and found bodies, but they were decomposing. Even my grandson, I only identified him by his shirt. We couldn't tell who had died. We just buried all the bodies we found.
Many are still displaced. Nia Bontoto tells me she'd like to return home, but there's nothing to go back to. She comes from the port city of Mocimboa da Praia. It was under militant control for more than a year. Almost every building we saw had been destroyed from previous fighting.
It's here in Mocimboa da Praia that the forces finally declared victory. This was the stronghold of the militants, the nerve center of their operations.
The militants could be on the back foot, thought to be hiding in a forest further south, but the threat they pose is still real. Ann Soy, BBC News, Cabo Delgado.
The Labour Party says it would end what it calls the outrageous practice of foreign buyers purchasing huge swathes of new housing developments in a bid to help first-time buyers. The party would also give first-time buyers what it says would be first dibs on new builds for 6 months, and it's planning to reform rules governing how developers contribute to affordable housing. The proposals will be unveiled at the party's conference, which begins tomorrow in Brighton. A man who spent years collecting old postcards has been tracking down the people they were originally sent to, or their families, in order to reunite them with a piece of their past. Stu Prince began the project when he was forced to shield during lockdown last year. Well, Amanda Curtin has been to meet him.
Oh yeah, these are the orphanage ones. Well, I've always been interested in postcards as such, but I got leukemia, and that meant heavy chemo. I was in a state of shock, really. I was wondering whether I'd be here or not. It was a pretty scary time. Well, COVID was that next year, 2020. Then I knew I was going to be locked down for quite a while. And I thought about me postcards, and I said I used to enjoy them.
Needing a distraction, Stu began purchasing postcards in online auctions.
And I thought, well, I could open a little Facebook group, reach people with the intention of reuniting with families. And I started putting them on 6 at a time, and people started to get interested and matched a couple.
Exhausted from his treatment, Stu had limitations. People started to pull together to help him to research.
I was poorly, and the only way I could cope was with my researchers. They're fantastic.
I'm looking all the time for evidence that will tie the name to the address and the date. Some of the postcards might have a happy birthday, so I will send them a personal message.
And how does it feel when she finds them?
Yes!
Quite early on, Stu purchased a postcard that was sent in 1946 to a baby.
It was such a cute card to a 1-year-old, and I thought that was absolutely lovely. I put the card on my page. One of my researchers, she contacted me saying I found the baby. Then laundromat contacted me. That card is me, that baby's me. Well, I was chuffed to death.
I got a Facebook message from Stu talking about this postcard that he's found.
The postcard was sent by Fermet's late grandparents.
I was amazed. It was for my first birthday, and that 74 years ago.
Out of adversity came something really nice and something useful for a big reach of people, and I felt really good about it. I felt good about myself for the first time for quite a while. Part of my recovery, really, to feel useful. And I think that's for any person recovering from leukemia or cancer, to feel useful is big, it's massive.
Stu Prince ending that report from Amanda Curtin. The Duchess of Cambridge was guest of honour today at the Lawn Tennis Association National Centre. It was a homecoming event for the 4 British winners of the US Open, including Emma Raducanu, of course, who became the first British woman to win a Grand Slam singles title in 44 years. And she's been talking about her plans for the future.
I haven't thought too far ahead. I mean, I have been getting back onto the training court, but competition-wise, I haven't been putting a focus on which tournament. And just when I'm ready, I'll get out there. I definitely want to keep just improving and being the best version of myself on the court and off the court, and maximising my potential. And I still think I have a lot of room for development in terms of my tennis career and where it can go. So yeah, excited to start working on it.
Boxer Anthony Joshua is weighing in this lunchtime ahead of the defence of his WBA, WBO and IBF World Heavyweight titles tomorrow night when he takes on the Ukrainian Alexander Usyk in London. Well, speaking ahead of the fight, he revealed how he deals with the stress and the mental challenge of competing at an elite level. He's been talking to Adi Adedoyan.
Anthony Joshua is box office, and on Saturday he'll aim to produce a punch-perfect performance in the biggest stadium fight in the UK since the pandemic.
I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling blessed. What an opportunity this is. I'm one of the lucky ones that get to go out there and perform. It is difficult, don't get me wrong, it comes with a lot of sacrifice, but as long as you apply yourself, you shouldn't have, not too much to worry about. We can't predict the outcome, but leading up to it, we should be confident.
So if he's the leading man in the show, what of his co-star Alexander Usyk? Happy to play the Joker, he turned up to Thursday's press conference dressed in a suit, inspired by the movie character. Eccentric and zany, but behind the smiles, a fierce and fiery competitor. Like Joshua, he's a gold medalist from London 2012 and a former undisputed cruiserweight champion of the world. Usyk is blessed with great footwork and hand-eye coordination, though he's not the only one who can do that. Mind and body will need to be in sync on Saturday if Joshua is to prevail. He'll start as favourite, as he often does. So how does he deal with the constant pressure to win and the attention and demands that comes with it?
What I call it is the gift and the curse. You've got the gift of going out there, performing in front of so many people, the accolades when you win, presidents want to meet you and all this stuff, yeah. But then on the flip side, there's a whole heap of stuff that you didn't expect, that you're not prepared for, that come with it. People don't train you for the mental capacity of what it's going to take to be at the top of your game.
Well, the two men will weigh in on that stage behind me within the next 30 minutes. Anthony Joshua has been cool, calm and collected all week, but in Alexander Usyk, he knows he's up against a man who could derail his ambitions to become the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. Adi Adedoyan, BBC News, London.
And from boxing to golf, because one of sport's greatest rivalries, the Ryder Cup, has just got underway today after being delayed a year because of coronavirus. Team Europe may hold the trophy, but they face the Americans on home soil in Wisconsin, with Team USA widely considered the favourites to win. Andy Swiss is there for us now. Andy.
Yes, Ben, golf fans have been waiting a long time for this moment. As you say, the Ryder Cup was supposed to happen last year before it was postponed because of COVID. But in the last few minutes, it has finally got underway. A raucous atmosphere on the opening hole where thousands of fans had gathered to watch the first match, and Europe's Sergio Garcia hit the opening shot. It is always one of the most atmospheric moments in sport. But it is just the start of 3 days of competition here at Whistling Straits. As you say, on paper, the US do start as the favourites. They have on paper the strongest side. They have 8 out of the world's top 10 players, including the Open champion Colin Morikawa. And they also have a huge home advantage because of travel restrictions from Europe. Very few European fans are able to get here to support their team. So the crowd will be almost entirely one-sided. We've already heard lots of chants of USA, USA. That said, though, Europe do have bags of experience in their team, the likes of Rory McIlroy, Ian Poulter, Lee Westwood, and they do have a terrific recent track record in the Ryder Cup. They've won it 4 out of the last 5 times, including the last event at Paris in 2018, which they won emphatically. So they are the underdogs, but expect plenty of drama before we find out the winners on Sunday, Ben.
Can't wait. Andy, thank you very much indeed. Nice and sunny there. Let's see what the weather's like here. The latest forecast for you now from Chris Fawkes.
Thanks a lot, Ben. And the amount of cloud we see is going to vary quite a bit, well, sometimes hour to hour even. This was Sennan in Cornwall earlier this morning, and 2 hours later, the same place bathed in low cloud, mist and murk. Yes, it's going to be one of those kind of days across western areas of the UK with extensive cloud here. Across the eastern side of Scotland, central and eastern England, down to parts of eastern Wales. That's where the best of the breaks in the cloud will continue to be, and we'll have the best of the sunshine. Temperatures, even where it stays cloudy, we're on the mild side, 19, 20 degrees, but in the best of the sunshine, could see highs hit 24. Overnight tonight, if anything, it's going to turn quite murky widely across western areas, particularly western England, southern England and Wales, with hill fog patches around the coast as well. Not much variation in our temperatures given the cloud, 13 to 15 degrees. Now this weekend, our air is coming from a long way southwest, dragging up that subtropical heat. That will really be boosting the temperatures this weekend, and quite widely we'll see those highs reach the low 20s. Now, Lossiemouth is in northern Scotland, and here we'll see temperatures around about 6 Celsius above where they should be at this late stage of September. So really very, very warm air for the late September. We start off, though, with extensive cloud, a bit of drizzle, particularly for western Scotland, maybe an odd patch elsewhere in the west. A lot of dry weather, though, and the cloud will tend to thin and break as the day goes by. Again, the best of the sunshine, central and eastern England, eastern areas of Scotland, with those temperatures in those sunnier spots widely reaching the low 20s again. Now, for Sunday, the only real weather front to worry about is this one coming into the west. It's a cold front that's going to be bringing heavy rain eventually into Northern Ireland with some strengthening winds. And actually, even ahead of that, the winds will be blowing a little bit more strongly across Scotland, England and Wales. Those slightly stronger winds should blow a few more holes in the cloud, so a better chance of seeing a bit of sunshine away from this area of rain that's going to be working into Northern Ireland. Temperatures in the sunshine again widely into the low 20s, very warm still for this stage of the year. But then through Sunday night, our cold front, this area of rain, pushes eastwards across the country and eventually it clears through Monday morning. What follows is the air coming down originally from a northerly direction, coming in across the UK. That's going to be dragging in some much cooler and fresher air. And it looks quite unsettled too. Quite a lot of cloud across northern and western areas with widespread showers, some of them quite heavy and blustery. Those temperatures close to perhaps even a smidge below average. So, Ben, after a few more warm days to come, eventually autumn proper arrives on Monday.
All right, Chris, many thanks indeed. And that is all from the BBC News at 1. So it's goodbye from me, and on BBC One now we'll join the BBC's news teams where you are. Have a very good afternoon.